Montgomery Clift, the name that once lit up Hollywood, carried a mystery so dark it would take decades to unravel. Born Edward Montgomery Clift on October 17, 1920, in Omaha, Nebraska, he came into the world surrounded by privilege, yet trapped in an emotionally tangled upbringing. His mother, a determined socialite convinced of her aristocratic bloodline, raised him under strict ideals of refinement and culture. But behind this polished facade lay shadows that would shape his life, and ultimately his downfall. From an early age, Montgomery Clift was immersed in a world of art, literature, and languages, gifts that would later infuse his performances with an unmatched depth and sensitivity. But behind the promise of brilliance, his youth was far from idyllic. The devastating stock market crash of 1929 shattered his family's financial stability, casting a long shadow over his formative years. The once vibrant and curious young Monty, as those close to him called him, grew quiet and inward, retreating into his thoughts. This inner solitude became a well from which he would draw the raw emotional power that defined his acting. Clift's journey to stardom didn't begin in Hollywood's glimmering studios, but on the demanding stages of Broadway. At just 15 years old, he made his debut in the play Fly Away Home, instantly turning heads with his precision, discipline, and the quiet intensity he brought to every moment on stage. Critics and audiences alike sensed they were witnessing the rise of a rare talent, an actor whose performances felt less like portrayals and more like lived truth. It was this undeniable authenticity that would set him apart and pave the way for his legendary career. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Montgomery Clift never chased the glitz of Hollywood for fame or fortune. For him, acting was not a stepping stone to celebrity, it was a pure art form. He approached every role with an almost surgical precision, immersing himself completely in the craft. In the 1940s, his relentless dedication earned him a place among America's most promising young stage actors, sharing the spotlight with theatrical legends like Tallulah Bankhead and Lillian Hellman. His performances carried a quiet intensity, driven by a commitment to psychological realism and an unwavering pursuit of truth on stage, rejecting the overblown theatrics that dominated the era. This integrity set him apart and made Hollywood take notice. In 1948, Clift made his stunning film debut in the western Red River, starring opposite the iconic John Wayne. Yet, instead of mirroring Wayne's bold, rugged heroism, Clift infused his character with an unexpected depth, subtle vulnerability layered with emotional complexity. It was a performance that didn't just contrast with Wayne's bravado, it redefined what a leading man in Hollywood could be, signaling the arrival of an artist who would forever change the way acting was understood on screen. He acted in The Search, a moving drama about a teenage Holocaust survivor, that same year, earning a nomination for a Clift Academy Award for Best Actor. He was instantly identified as a novel form of on-screen persona. Sensitive yet strong, attractive but troubled. He was a heartthrob because of his intense stare and slim, angular good looks. He was memorable, however, because of his internal strife and emotional honesty. Clift, along with James Dean and Marlon Brando, played a significant role in the development of method acting. He had never trained at the actor's studio, nevertheless, unlike Brando. Despite this, Clift had a significant impact on the development of movie acting. He redefined the leading man for future generations by paving the way for more vulnerable, introspective masculine characters. Clift gave a number of outstanding performances in some of the most well-known movies of the 1950s. He portrayed George Eastman, a working-class man divided between ambition and love, opposite Elizabeth Taylor in the 1951 film A Place in the Sun. His portrayal is now regarded as one of the most prestigious in cinematic history. Clift and Taylor's off-screen connection would last a lifetime because of their electrifying chemistry. Clift received his second Oscar nomination in 1953 for his portrayal of a soldier who defies convention, Private Robert E. Lee Pewitt, in From Here to Eternity. His portrayal demonstrated the breadth of his emotional range in a straightforward and subtly melancholy manner. He kept pushing himself by playing challenging parts in movies like I Confess, Rain County, and The ARS. In his art, he constantly aims for truth and authenticity. However, after leaving a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's house in 1956, Clift was engaged in a near-fatal vehicle accident, which tragically changed the course of his life and career. His face was severely injured in the collision, necessitating several surgery. Despite his fortunate survival, he suffered long-lasting bodily and psychological harm. His formerly remarkable features were irreversibly changed, and the agony caused him to become more and more dependent on drink and narcotics. Clift's performance was nevertheless impactful in spite of these difficulties. He played a developmentally challenged man who had been sterilized by the Nazis in judgment at Nuremberg in 1961. It was a heartbreaking performance that lasted only a few minutes, but it won him another nomination for an Academy Award. His remarkable talent and tenacity were demonstrated by his ability to play parts with such empathy and passion despite going through severe personal hardship. Clift's latter years were characterized by deteriorating health, personal hardships, and an unpredictable career. However, his performances continued to have a haunting depth even in his later parts, such as in The Misfits, 1961, starring Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable. He was described as compassionate, intelligent, and tortured by those who knew him intimately. At a period when being openly homosexual or bisexual may ruin one's career, a guy struggling with his sexuality. He has a sad mystique that has only grown stronger over time due to his mental struggle, loneliness, and eternal quest for identity. The Defector, 1966, his final finished film, was a spy thriller that offered hints of the depth of feeling he continued to carry despite his declining health. The intricacy and diversity of Montgomery Clift's personal relationships have been highlighted by numerous biographers who have examined his life, with a special emphasis on his amorous interactions with both men and women. Interviews with his intimate friends, associates, and those who knew him in different Hollywood and Broadway circles provide the majority of these tales. Though Clift was associated publicly to a handful of women such as the bright and dynamic actors Libby Holman and Phyllis Thaxter, the quality and duration of these relationships pale in comparison to the deep, private friendships he developed with various men throughout his life. Among the ladies who were allegedly close to Clift was Holman, an actress and singer with a turbulent personal background. Some have claimed that although their relationship was mostly short-lived, there were some intense emotional moments. Comparably, Clift was linked to Phyllis Thaxter, a well-respected actress who was renowned for her poise and grace, through social circles and sporadic love conjecture, but there is little proof that their relationship was anything more than fleeting and incidental. On the other hand, Clift's most significant and enduring romantic partnerships were with males, many of whom had a strong background in the performing arts. Clift felt more accepted and understood in a milieu. Jack Larson, an actor best known for playing Jimmy Olsen in the television series Adventures of Superman, was one of his most prominent partners. There was more to their relationship than friendship. It was a major romantic and emotional engagement at a time when it was very uncommon and possibly dangerous for one's career to publicly acknowledge such connections. Another important person in Clift's personal life was William Lemma, a well-known theatrical actor with whom he had a roughly 3-year relationship. Both guys held this friendship in particular in the highest regard. In addition to being a loyal friend to Clift throughout his life, Lemma also helped to preserve memories of their time together by recording reels of film that showed their group of friends having fun and relaxing together while working on shows like There Shall Be No Night. This vintage video is a moving example of their intimacy and provides a unique window into their happy, private moments that were frequently kept hidden from the public. Jerome Robbins, the well-known Broadway director and choreographer, was one of Clift's most significant and emotionally charged partners. The public and even many of their peers were mostly unaware of their affair, which many who knew them regarded as intense and emotionally fraught. They both used this tactic to conceal their relationship in order to preserve their professions and privacy from the social pressures of the day, which forced them to date women in public. In addition to being amorous, Clift and Robin had a creative and intellectually challenging relationship. They had such a close relationship that Robbins was said to be saddened when Clift made the crucial decision in 1948 to leave Robbins and relocate to Hollywood in order to pursue a career in movies. The emotional intensity of their relationship was clear in Robbins' statements to Clift at their parting, where he stated he could make Clift love him, demonstrating the depth of his sentiments and the emotional stakes involved. Both men's lives and professions were significantly impacted by this relationship, which highlights the tremendous personal hardships gay artists endure during a time of pervasive bigotry. Beyond their personal lives, Robin's artistic brilliance and his collaboration with Clift had a creative knock-on impact. According to folklore, Robbins came up with the basic plot of the iconic musical West Side Story after Clift gave him a thought-provoking notion that emphasized the merging of their personal and professional lives. Actor Russ Tamblyn said Robbins attributed the idea of turning Romeo and Juliet into a modern tale about New York gangs to Clift. According to Tamblyn, Robbins recounted how Clift came up with the concept at a Fire Island party, which sparked Robbins' creativity and ultimately led to the development of the groundbreaking musical. This story not only highlights Clift's artistic impact but also highlights how important their friendship was in generating significant works of art. As evidence of the regard and love that characterized their relationship, Robin even went so far as to refer to Clift as a theatrical genius. When Barney Baliban, the president of Paramount Pictures, invited Clift to join the Baliban family on a holiday in Nassau, Bahamas, in the early 1950s, Clift's network of friends grew to include Hollywood officials. Barney's daughter, Judy Baliban, recalled experiencing a unique and instant connection with Clift, comparing their time together to being joined at the hip. Their months-long courtship was well publicized enough for Judy to go on a date with Clift to the 1951 New York premiere of his picture A Place in the Sun. Judy later said that she was ignorant about Clift's sexual orientation and his ongoing romance with British actor Rhodey McDowall at the time, despite the media's belief that Baliban and Clift were romantically linked in the conventional sense. Elizabeth Taylor, one of Clift's closest friends and confidants, had introduced McDowall to the actor, who was well known for his parts in iconic movies like Lassie Come Home. Clift and Rhodey McDowall had a close and passionate relationship. When McDowall's acting career was slowing down, he decided to devote all of his attention to helping Clift, relocating from Los Angeles to New York to be near him. About 2.5 years passed during their alliance. And when relationship eventually ended, McDowall's dedication was so intense that he reportedly attempted suicide following their split. A sign of the emotional intensity of their connection. Despite the pain, McDowall had no grudges and was a faithful friend to Clift all the way to the death. Their professional relationship culminated in The Defector, Clift's final film, where McDowall's moral support was necessary for Clift to complete the movie, emphasizing the linked nature of their personal and careers. Other cultural luminaries of Clift's era also had an impact on his love life. Clift briefly dated renowned author Truman Capote, another openly gay artist renowned for his literary brilliance and nuanced social life, while they were filming in Italy with Vittorio Da. Although the specifics of their relationship are still mostly unknown, the two men had a bond that extended beyond their professional lives. While filming From Here to Eternity, Clift also became good friends with author James Jones. Clift had a powerful influence on others around him, as evidenced by Jones's public recognition of their unique link and his admission that he would have pursued an affair with Clift if Clift had invited it. One of Clift's previous close contacts was with composer Lehman Engel, a well-known personality in the theater and music industries, demonstrating Clift's strong connections to the creative community in a variety of fields. Clift's social and romantic network within the arts and literature was very broad, as seen by Clift's involvement with literary figures Donald Wyndham and Sandy Campbell. Clift's complicated personal life was further complicated by the suggestion in his biography by playwright and screenwriter Arthur Lawrence that Clift might have had an affair with actor Farley Granger. These connections, frequently entwined with friendship, creative cooperation and romantic love, depict a man who, in spite of the obstacles presented by the social mores of his era, yearned for intimacy and connection. Clift's ability to handle these relationships tactfully but profoundly demonstrates both his strength and fragility, making his personal life just as interesting and complex as his illustrious acting career. Montgomery Clift's life and death have been surrounded by mystery, conjecture, and grief for many years. Clift was a terrifying figure in Hollywood's heyday, and both on and off film, his piercing eyes and delicate intensity made him a symbol of wounded masculinity. However, beneath the performances that enthralled millions, there was a severely wounded soul, and the sobering realities of his deterioration are only now becoming apparent. Furthermore, the disclosures are more unsettling than fans could have ever guessed. Critics, admirers, and biographers have all long been captivated by Clift's mysterious demise. Clift appeared to be headed for enduring fame after being heralded as the future of American film and compared to icons like James Dean and Marlon Brando. But by the late 1950s, his health was failing, his career was in a tailspin, and his once beautiful face, which had been mutilated in a terrible car accident, became a representation of a life that had been shattered by more than just physical anguish. Although many saw the tragedy as the end, recent information indicates it was only a trigger for a much more terrible unraveling. The public was blind to the fact that the man was plagued by demons that went far beyond the facial scars. Clift endured silent suffering as he had to conceal his true identity from a critical industry and an unaccepting society during a time when homosexuality was frowned upon and even illegal. He needed to navigate a merciless double existence, one in which he could in no way fully specific who he turned into. Pals who knew the reality frequently said his deep loneliness, his anxiety, and the mental toll of constantly hiding his authentic self. His ache had become a silent associate, feeding right into a cycle of addiction, depression, and self-destruction. In latest years, once sealed private letters, personal stories, and unearthed studio documents have finally painted a greater complete and a long way darker image. Clift wasn't simply fighting Hollywood's expectations. He turned into being actively manipulated and exploited via a device that knew his reality and weaponized it towards him. Studio heads allegedly blackmailed him into silence, the use of the risk of publicity to govern his roles and his income. Directors and retailers, whilst profiting from his talent, reportedly turned a blind eye to his emotional disintegrate, unwilling to jeopardize their investments for the sake of his nicely being. Even his famed comeback in Judgment at Nuremberg masked the grim truth backstage. Even as audiences marveled at his tortured performance, few knew that Clift becomes slightly functioning all through filming, needing a couple of takes, medication, and coaxing to supply even some traces. His private health practitioner at the time later found out that Clift became tormented by a mix of undiagnosed PTSD, substance dependence, and severe malnutrition, conditions that had been routinely neglected or downplayed in public. Perhaps the most heartbreaking revelation is that Clift's loss of life in 1966, lengthy believed to be a surprising heart assault, become much more likely the end result of years of systemic forget-about, emotional suppression, and untreated psychological trauma. One near pal even described his very last years as a gradual suicide, no longer through a single act, but through the cumulative weight of a world that might now not let him live freely. Love openly or heal really. Consistent with a few bills, Clift had stopped consuming, changed into consuming heavily again, and had ended up an increasing number of remote in the weeks leading as much as his demise. He changed into discovered by myself in his Big Apple townhouse, his frame giving out after years of suffering that no person had honestly addressed. The mystery of 1st Viscount Montgomery of Alamine Clift is not pretty much a talented actor misplaced too soon. It is approximately a person destroyed through a machine that demanded brilliance but punished reality. It's about the excessive value of repression, the cruelty of fame, and the harmful silence surrounding intellectual health in Hollywood. And now that the pieces of his tragic puzzle are in the end being assembled, one aspect is painfully clear. The fact at the back of Montgomery Clift's fall from grace isn't just heartbreaking. It's infuriating. And it serves as a cautionary tale approximately what takes place whilst a society refuses to permit a soul live really.